Paul Hanson's leadership principle number one is care about getting it right more than being right. Say more about that.
Yeah, I think as leaders, we have to be willing to be wrong at times and comfortable with that to an extent. And I think when you mentioned authentic just a little bit ago, that made me think that really ties well to this. I never really thought of that. But if you're somebody who always wants to be right, focuses on being right yourself, you're inauthentic because you're not going to get it right every time. So having that ability to be willing to be wrong at times, admit when you're wrong, and embrace the suck of that vulnerability of admitting at the times when you're wrong, I think is really key to getting buy-in from the people around you, because they're going to latch onto that vulnerability and really bond with you and see that you care about getting the right things for the organization and not just proving yourself right at the end of the day.
Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced. The best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world.
Hey everybody, it's Jason, and welcome back to the Thermostat podcast. Wherever you may be listening today, or wherever you are in your journey, thanks for joining in. Glad you are with us. If 2020 taught us nothing else, we need to be able to adapt. We need to be able to connect as leaders. We need to make sure that the people that we are traveling with, that we are together aligning and thinking about the culture that we are creating together. I've never been more convinced of this than ever, that authentic leadership in the world is needed today, and creating compelling cultures, the teams and organizations and companies that are proactively shaping the culture they want, not just reactionary, the culture they're experiencing, are the ones that are thriving and are going to be able to move through the obstacles and challenges that they face. So thanks to everybody who's listening in today and have listened as a part of seasons 1, 2, or 3. Now we're in season 4. So I hope you continue to stay involved in the journey. Thank you to everyone out there who, of course, shares, rates, reviews. All of those ways help amplify these messages out further into the world and share them with people that want to be a part of conversations like this. So thanks for helping to amplify the messages and being a part of today's show. I am very excited to invite my guest for today into this chat in just a minute. I am actually set to be and honored to be the keynote speaker at the upcoming Epcon Franchising National Leadership Conference. Epcon, for those of you that don't know, Epcon is a network of independent builders across the United States that are specialized in building homes and communities for people in the 55 and plus demographic. I'm excited to be at their event, their national leadership event, to keynote that here coming up soon. And so today I am excited to be inviting in the president of Epcon Franchising, Paul Hanson, who has presided over an unprecedented period of growth. I'm excited to add value to their conference soon, but we're going to talk about Paul and his continuation of growing leadership and culture at Epcon. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Jason. Great to be here. Looking forward to seeing you in a couple of days at the conference. Closed us out great last year, and I expect the same this year with a great keynote.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, I've been grateful and honored to be a voice along your journey and with your team and your organization, and excited to be back again and to be able to connect with people and to talk about how do we, especially in 2021 and as we move forward, how do we continue to raise the bar on leadership, growing leaders, and also creating the kind of culture that we want with our teams and throughout organizations. So Honored to be with you all. But for today on this podcast, I want to focus on you, and I want to focus on your leadership, and I want to take the opportunity to have you share some of the leadership principles that have guided your journey. You and I, in our chats leading up to this, you've been gracious enough to share with me kind of 5 of the leadership principles that have been, I'd say, kind of that you've been rooted in, or at least have helped guide your journey. I won't put words in your mouth. I'll let you explain them to us. But I'm excited for our listeners today to just think about some of these 5 principles that have, at least have guided your leadership journey along the way. So let's dive into these 5. What we'll do is I'll introduce them just kind of one at a time. And then I want you to share what do these mean to you and how they've impacted the way that you've led your organization, and how it's impacted the way your mindset of showing up as a leader and the culture that you're trying to create each day with your people. So Paul Hanson's leadership principle number 1 is care about getting it right more than being right. Say more about that.
Yeah, I think as leaders, we have to be willing to be wrong at times and comfortable with that to an extent. And I think when you mentioned authentic just a little bit ago, that made me think that really ties well to this. I never really thought of that. But if you're somebody who always wants to be right, focuses on being right yourself, you're inauthentic, because you're not going to get it right every time. So having that ability to be willing to be wrong at times, admit when you're wrong, and embrace the suck of that vulnerability of admitting at times when you're wrong, I think is really key to getting buy-in from the people around you, because they're going to latch onto that vulnerability and really bond with you and see that you care about getting the right things for the organization and not just proving yourself right at the end of the day. And I think I even take it farther with the team, and I tell them, it's your job to tell me when I'm wrong. It's your job to help me get it right. And I freely admit when I start them, I'm not going to be right all the time. And I consider one of your key result areas to be how many times you disagree with me and help me get it right at the end of the day.
No, I love that. So oftentimes what I tell leaders and teams and organizations is that, 3 powerful words that leaders don't use enough but need to leverage when it's appropriate is I don't know. And that it's okay to not know, that sometimes we think that as a leader that we're supposed to have all of the answers, and that anybody asks a question or any decision to be made is that we have it naturally all figured out. And the reality is that the best leaders, at least that I've experienced and studied and observed, are ones that have the ability to say, hey, I'm not sure in this situation. I need more time to think it through. I want to collaborate. I want to talk it through with the team. I need to think about that for a second, and aren't afraid, to not know at first, and also not be afraid to not have the right answer yet, or being able. What I'm hearing you say is also being able to be challenged, or at least for somebody on your team to step up and disagree with you. So this kind of putting aside the ego, the kind of self-ego is what I hear in this, and keeping though the mission of whatever the team is at the center and out front. So kind of putting that self-ego aside and putting that team out in front. Is that the way that you think about that?
Yes, and I think you'll get there a lot faster if you just put it out there instead of trying to let it happen naturally. Make your culture a safe place to disagree and for people to challenge each other. And I know, like you said, if you're a new leader or in a new position, one of the scariest things is when that first time you don't have the answer, because you do feel like you need to have the answers all the time. But as you grow, you'll find if you can ask questions and challenge your team when you don't know the answer to come up with the answer themselves, you're going to get a better result than if you just try and put your head down and do it yourself.
Yeah, no doubt. Collaboration is king, and especially in the world today, to be able to elicit the thoughts, the minds and hearts of the people around you, rather than just blindly putting your head down and thinking that you have to have all the answers. So I love that. Care about getting it right more than being the person that is right. I love that. How about the second principle, at least that you share with me, is make good decisions quickly instead of perfect ones that take too long. Say more about that leadership principle, that the make good decisions quickly instead of perfect ones that take too long.
I've always had a strong bias towards action. And so that led, when I was early in my career, I'd get frustrated when things would take too long, when decisions would, there'd be meetings after meetings, and then each meeting would end with an agreement to schedule another report or another meeting. And I want to be the person that's tried something out 4 or 5 times before the average person makes the first decision. And especially in what we do at my company, we have the benefit of knowing that most decisions are undoable if necessary. And so again, referring back to the first one, if you're willing to be wrong at times, you can make the quick decision to do something, and then also make the quick decision if it's not working to adjust to something better based on the feedback you're getting.
Yeah, and I what I hear in that statement too is, in a key part of that is make good decisions, not just make decisions quickly, because and I know you and I have talked about this in the past, that we live in a culture right now that is instantaneous world of gratification, an instantaneous world that's around us all the time. And so oftentimes leaders, teams, and organizations get tricked into this thinking of busyness rather than effectiveness, where we're just running around doing a bunch of stuff, and doing a bunch of stuff, though, if they're not the right decisions or they're not good decisions, it leads to this perpetuating of kind of busyness rather than us being truly effective at what we're trying to accomplish or what we're trying to do. So the key words, at least that I see in that, is this idea of not just making decisions quickly make a decision, but make a good decision quickly rather than drawing it out with this long, laborious process that maybe doesn't move the needle forward. Is there a spirit in there that resonates with you?
Absolutely. This isn't about making rash decisions. It's about trusting yourself, identifying, I guess, what I would call the flinch. If you're maybe hesitating on something just for irrational reasons, really. But again, you're in this position of leadership because you've done a lot of great things, and you're trusted to make these good decisions. So as long as you work with your team and follow that process, I don't think you're going to make too many rash decisions. You're going to make good ones, and then not fall victim to paralysis by analysis of trying to find the perfect decision with zero objections, because there just aren't too many of those out there. Yeah.
And I mean, and we live in a fast world right now. I mean, when things are moving quickly, the rate of change is fast. So we have to be able to be agile and nimble and all of that. But also within teams and organizations, there can also be, I've been in and out of many companies where there has also been a culture of, let's have a meeting to plan our next meeting, and so we can get it trapped into this cadence of kind of that kind of the outgrowth of it becomes that paralysis by analysis that you just referenced. But this meeting just to meet, but this perpetuating the meeting rather than let's make sure that we take good time to make good decisions, but not draw it out to this meeting after meeting when we need to be able to gather good information, make sound and good decisions, and get clear on what are the next actions. And then let's go. Let's make progress, and let's go, and be willing, as you said in the principle number 1, is be willing to then step back and say, all right, do we need to adjust our decision? And is there something that we would change or do differently? So that kind of agility, I think, is key.
Yeah, and I've always been risk tolerant for as long as I can remember. If you're somebody that's a leader that's maybe a little more risk averse than me, I would encourage you to practice risk taking. I think it's not really a natural trait. It's a learned trait. So start small with some risks and work up to it. And then you're going to get more comfortable making quick decisions, which are really necessary, as you said, in today's world with how fast everything's moving.
Awesome. So the third leadership principle that I have in front of you is warms my heart, and is speaking my kind of language especially too, as it says, I have no doubt that there will be time in the near future, I'm not sure when, but where there will be power in congregating again, power in bringing your whole team together, your entire company and organization together in one space for that powerful keynote speech, that discussion that has to happen as a team, an entire organization about leadership and culture and mindset. But until then, we are in a virtual world, And so if I can add value to your team, your company, or organization through a virtual keynote speech, or just helping your team and organization have the conversation that's the currency for change that you need to be having internally, I hope you'll track us down and let us know how we can be helpful at jasonvbarger.com. So the third leadership principle that I have in front of you is warms my heart, and it is speaking my kind of language especially too, is it says work towards the culture you want instead of accepting the culture that you have. Let me say that again, because this is, again, for all my listeners and people that their ears are going to perk up, because this is something that I talk a lot about. But work towards the culture you want instead of accepting the culture that you have. What do you mean by that, Paul?
Well, I freely admit that I'm not a very creative person, so most of these are just things that I've learned from books I've read or podcasts or talks I've heard. And this one is yours for sure, the thermostat cultures concept. And so this is all about asking yourself, does your culture just happen at your company, or are you proactive about it? Are your company values established? Have you had those conversations, that currency for change that you talk about?
Yeah.
Is your mission statement inspiring, and is it really on the same page of where you want your company to be and what you talk about, what gets everybody up in the morning? And then have you gone through the 6 A's that you talk about in your book, and that whole process that we've done here, and really then anchored ourselves to what we've established is really a difference maker, because we're very deliberate in what we want to be and how we want to go about doing it.
Well, I love that. And by the way, all listeners, I did not know Paul was going to say that. So this is great to hear. And I appreciate that. But when I saw that as one of your leadership principles, that makes me feel great. It's cool to see that those words and that style of thinking has not only been a good idea to you, but been something that you have implemented and then carried on into your culture. But that idea, absolutely, that so many teams and organizations, as you know, they get stuck in that kind of reactionary thinking. And so the culture that they end up experiencing is just very reactionary. And so the way they describe their culture is just, well, whatever it currently is, rather than what do we proactively want it to become? And what is our strategy? And how are we intentionally leading and then developing and growing and designing the culture that we want? And so thank you for referencing the 6 A's, because that is the process of culture shaping that we go through, whether we know it or not. That is just how things in the world change. And so we have to go through that process, though. But the key is, are you proactively shaping it? And do you have a plan? Do you have a design? Or are you just settling for what you're currently experiencing in the moment? And it sounds like you've seen the power of that with developing your teams and your organization.
Yes, and when I get asked, how do you go about having a great culture, I struggle to answer it, because it's not just one thing. It's a big process, and it's a commitment. It's not easy, but it starts with, as you say in the book, that you assess where you are right now, talk about that, just be candid with yourself, and then talk about where you want to go and how you get everybody on the same page. And I think for us, that started with revisiting our mission statement, which previously was kind of boring and talked about systems and processes. And it was kind of a checklist of what we provide to our clients, and not necessarily what our vision is for our clients. And then anchoring onto that, and then talking about, okay, here's our mission now, and what are the values that align with that mission, and how do we achieve them? And then we talk about it regularly to anchor it.
I love it, man. I love it. Yeah, because, I mean, again, as you know, that language helps drive behavior. And so if we don't have the language, a lot of people think that having a mission statement or vision statement or core values language, that a lot of people are like, yeah, we have them because we have to have them, or yeah, it's a cool poster that we put on the wall. But the best places, the cultures that are truly alive and where that is a living, breathing part of everything they do, they know that you have to have the language. Because if you can't describe the future culture that you're trying to create, what is our mission? Where is it that why are we doing this? Where is it we're trying to go? What's that vision? And then how? What are those values that are going to help drive us in our action and behavior every day of how we're going to show up together and create that culture? If we don't have language and we can't articulate it, then we can't be surprised when it doesn't exist. And so having the language, and then again, it's not about a poster. You got to have the language, but then it sounds like, and you've embraced this, is the anchoring of that is then it becomes a living, breathing part of everything you do, by the way you hire, by the way you onboard, by the way you do performance evaluations, by the way you lead meetings, the way you entertain customers and clients and internal team and develop emerging leaders. All of that is a part of, this is the culture that we are proactively creating together. And so that's awesome.
Yeah, and it inspires everyone. And I'll take us off topic for a minute, but
yeah,
an additional added benefit of it that we found is it gives our sales team this language that just inspires people to want to do business with us too, that we're so clear on what we're doing and how we're changing our clients' businesses that then they're able to take that language. And so just from a selfish business growth standpoint, it's really made a world of difference in how they're able to talk to people when they're considering whether or not to join our program.
Yeah, well, I mean, and you've heard me say that culture becomes our competitive advantage. And again, it's not just about having great language, it's about having authentic language, but to be able to articulate to somebody, hey, this is not just what we do, but this is how we're committed to doing it. And the type of culture and create and team and the culture that we are creating together and the type of people that we're hoping to be and the relationships we're hoping to have with our customers and our clients, as we're better at able to articulate that, and again, not just in language, but in language and behavior, then that becomes the competitive advantage, because why would I not want to do more business with you if that is a differentiator between somebody that just builds homes and or the culture that's created of the people that are building it and the network of people of how we go through that experience together. I love it. I love it, man. This is you're speaking my language, and I didn't know that, but thank you for stealing that and for then sharing it, and most importantly for implementing it with your people. So let me talk about the fourth principle that I've got in front of you here, and I'm excited to hear more about this one. For the fourth principle, you say be optimistic, not positive. I'm interested to hear the distinct. I think I know what you mean by that, but tell me more, because I think both are important and needed. But be optimistic, not just positive. What do you mean by that?
Sure, it's all about knowing the difference between the two, and they each have a role. But I've often been criticized as just being positive all the time, or too positive, or just thinking everything's going to be great. We use 15-5 for our weekly check-ins with the team, and there's a company pulse section on that one. I'm always a 5 out of 5 on that. So that's kind of the joke around here, that if I ever dipped into a 4, they would think the apocalypse was here. But for me, it's not. There's action and reason behind it. So in my opinion, positivity is thinking everything will be great no matter what. It's all going to work out, and really having an unrealistic, rosy outlook on things. Optimism, which is what I use as a guiding principle, is I'm going to set out and do X, Y, and Z today. And because of that, I'm going to have a good result. I'm going to have a great result. And some weeks, the results aren't going to be as great as others, and there will be setbacks along the way. But again, with that diligence of planning my day, planning our goals, and following through on X, Y, and Z, we are ultimately going to have a good result.
Yeah, and optimism, I would point out, is it? I mean, it's powerful, by the way. I mean, I think optimism and positivity are both certainly needed, but this idea of optimism doesn't mean that we don't have challenging days, doesn't mean that we don't have obstacles, doesn't mean that things always go the way that we want them to go. But even in the midst of obstacles and challenges that show up along our path, optimism is about, do you have a belief in that things can get better? Are you willing to be honest about where your current state is? Right? So it's okay. Like, I can still, even if I'm having a tough day, or a project didn't go the way that we hoped it would, or the outcome didn't happen the way we want, I can still be optimistic about the next step and have a belief that it can get better. And I can be honest about where we are. And then it's tied to, okay, so what's that action that you're willing to do next? And optimism to me is that resource engine, that forward movement of tying that belief and honesty with action. And that kind of spins the wheels and gets us going forward. Have you seen that with your team and their reaction to you?
Yeah, and I think that they are of the belief that they're in control of their success. They're responsible for how they react to what happens to them. I know my father always drilled into my head when I was a child that life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. So I think that optimistic mindset is choosing how you respond to everything and then planning out a proper response and acting on it and knowing that you're in control of how it's ultimately going to turn out.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, back to, not to beat a dead horse, but back to the thermostat, is that if you don't have an idea of what those values are or what that temperature is that you're trying to set, then it's harder to figure out, okay, well, what is the next action that we're going to do? But if there's clarity around, hey, here are our values, then when a situation arises that is a challenge or is an opportunity or is just, man, what do we do here? Then you're able to say, hey, consistent with our values, here's the way we're going to respond. And we don't even really need to spend much time thinking about it because we've already been clear and intentional about this is proactively the culture we're going to create. And so the response becomes quicker and, again, is proactive rather than just purely reactionary.
Becomes ingrained because you've talked about it all along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. You've anchored it in that this is just the way we do it, and this is the way that we're going to respond, even when things don't go our way. All right, the fifth leadership principle that you shared is value people skills as much as performance skills. To value people skills as much as performance skills. Say more about that.
So I spent a number of years at a very large public builder, and the focus was entirely on your measurable results as an employee. And there were a number of cases where they would tolerate somebody that was a toxic member of the team just because he or she was great at selling or building houses. And the performance reviews were all numbers based and didn't get into how you related to the team, how you interacted with the team, whether you were a drain on other people within the team. And so I always want to be in a place where, yes, we're valuing performance. We're not going to want to be around people that are willing to accept anything less than our standards. But we're also going to value how you interact with the team and how strong of a person you are, and not just focus on the hard skills, but also the soft people skills.
Yeah. And so we all know that performance matters. I mean, performance matters in everything that we do, but it's not just what we do, it's how we do it. And to your point, everyone's been in and out, or at least certainly I've been in and out of different organizations where, and anybody that's interested in this idea, I did a previous podcast once talking about this idea of culture shaping, that what we allow lingers, but what we teach triggers. And what I mean by that is what we allow lingers. And so the habits that we allow, the way we operate, the language we use, the performance that we allow, that lingers and oftentimes becomes the culture that we create. And so those companies and organizations where what they allow is toxic behaviors, poor communication, only valuing the performance outcomes rather than the journey that it took to get there, those kind of things. If that's what you want, then what you allow will linger. But the organizations that realize, hey, it doesn't mean organizations are perfect, but the ones that step back and say, where is it that we want to change those habits and or value different things and put our eyesight on different ways of operating, what we proactively begin to teach begins to trigger a different value system and begins to then new habits and new ways of operating, become created. And so it's not just we all know that performance matters. I mean, we got to have good metrics, but it's not just about what we do, but how we do it and how we communicate, how we collaborate, how we serve matters. Is that in line with what you're saying?
Yes, your company standards fall to whatever you accept from your people. And I recently read a book, and the author told a story about a really high-performing individual on his team that nobody could stand within the company. It became a problem. And so he says he now has a beer chug test for anybody that he hires. Would I go chug a beer with this person? And so I think it's a good quick standard to have when you're interviewing with somebody.
That's a tip. You just picked up a Paul Hanson tip. I mean, if I had one right here, right now, we could do it on air, but sorry, I don't. Well, Paul, this has been great. We're already at our time, and I could sit here and talk about this kind of stuff forever. But I love the fact that the intentionality that clearly you bring to your leadership, and at least that you've taken the time to think about what are those guiding principles for your journey and how you've been asked to lead the company. And so in that role, what are going to be those kind of guiding principles for you? And again, care about getting it right more than being right. Make good decisions quickly instead of perfect ones that take too long. Work towards the culture you want instead of accepting the culture that you have. Fourth, be optimistic, not just positive. And fifth, value people skills as much as performance skills. So, buddy, I'm excited to be with your company again and to be a voice at the upcoming National Leadership Conference. I appreciate you taking the time to share some of these principles that have been a part of your journey and your development and the culture that you all are creating. And again, I will be honored to be another voice in helping to raise the bar and continue to nudge us all forward in terms of how we all continue to grow and develop as leaders and the cultures that we want to be a part of. So thanks for joining me on today's conversation.
Thank you, Jason. It's been a lot of fun. Looking forward to seeing you in a few days.
All right, buddy. Well, hey, for everybody out there, I appreciate you listening in. I hope this has been that something in this has triggered your mind and your heart and been a part of helping you step back, helping you to kind of recalibrate your own thermostat and think about not only how you're showing up for the vision that you have for whatever it is that you are doing in the world, but also for the culture that you're creating with the people around you. I am more convinced than ever that that progress requires courage. It requires a deep breath, an ability to step back in the midst of challenges and also identify opportunities, and then to take the next step. And that the best teams, the best leaders, the best cultures are the ones that intentionally step back and then seek solutions and together get aligned and then identify what are the next actions that we're going to put out into the world. So wherever you are listening today, thank you for joining in. I look forward to the next chat that we'll all have together. I hope you will continue to stay connected and stay involved at Jason V. Barger on social media and jasonvbarger.com. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using. And share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to your organization, or you have a question or comment about this podcast, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we all are ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.